that this dreaded world will crumble one day as its homonymous war, which separated East and Western Germany for decades, finally gave way to a united Germany. When my biological clock of having to pee and start my morning devotion woke me up at 5:30 a.m., I noticed we were clinging to a pillow tightly. I smiled at Eddie's sleeping face, stood up and went to ease myself. As I peed, I recalled that yesterday was the first day I had failed to do my morning devotion in years. I blamed it on the circumstances and the environment I found myself in at that Onisha hotel and the suspicious way I woke up that morning thinking that Eddie had raped me. It is challenging to start morning devotion with a stranger, but not having one can be very debilitating to my spiritual life. Secondly, I wasn't sure if he could approve of it in the first place because I hardly hear him say anything about God except for some abusive statements like God punish you and I swear to God. I attempted to wake him up with sounds of praise. A minute later, he joined me in singing and he amazed me to discover he knew the songs more than I did. I then requested him to lead us in prayers as the man of the house. It was a near comprehensive prayer, but the conversation with God has some pockets of doubt and insincerity. But who am I to question a prayer offered unto God? I've always known that God is an all-knowing God and He hears even the unspoken and hidden words in our hearts. As we finished sharing the grace, the doorbell rang in 3 successive sessions. It rang again in the same pattern, but Mr. Eddie seemed unwilling to answer the doorbell. He told me not to mind the bell. I suspected the pattern must be by a person who is not a first-time visitor to the house. It must be one of those people who bug one's life early in the morning to ask for one type of help or the other. They must understand that I am now married and have more responsibilities. Soon, children and other obligations will follow, he explained. Just then, I heard the gateman telling the person to stop. Oga Inode, he said. I don't tell you before, but you know one here. I took Eddie's word and asked what he would like to eat for breakfast. As we considered his choices, the doorbell started ringing again, but this time continuously, as if the person just pressed it down and held it there. The person started banging on the door and shouting, Eddie Best, or whatever you call yourself, come right now and open this door. I will pull it down. Do you think you can mess me up and then go to your village and pick a virgin? That will not work at all. The next thing I heard was the shattering of the Alumaco glass window, and Eddie jumped up in anger and mad fury. The anger and rage with which he stood up and started walking towards the door sent waves of shock through my nerves and aroused my 7 senses. There was a smell of disaster all over the place. I quickly rushed and grabbed him by the waist. I knelt and pleaded with him to avoid an impulsive reaction. I reached out for the sachet of pure water on the table. Just as I was about to give it to him, another window glass a few feet away from us went shattering again. The fight, litigation, and separation principles taught in Girl Scout training sessions came into play instantly. The technique involves trying as much as possible to engage an aggrieved person with something that would momentarily distract their attention. So I tossed the pure water into his hands and asked him to hold it tight. He looked at me and muttered, Baby, please let me teach this bitch a bitter lesson before she thinks I'm afraid of her. No need, baby, just relax first, I insisted. Please open the sachet and drink all of it slowly. My mother often told us not to beat a child the day he spills palm oil because he probably doesn't know the value or the difference between palm oil and its waste products. I would instead go out there and confront her woman to woman, rather than allow you to do something that might cause you to end up in prison. As I tried to calm him down, I heard the lady shouting and pleading with the gateman to let go of her. The voice slowly faded as if someone had dragged her away from the big queue. I stood up, rushed to the rear window, and saw the gateman carrying her on his shoulder, even as she kicked into the air and struggled to free herself. He finally got her outside the gate and screamed, Wallahi Talahi Oga Ide kind. If na me, you foresee the devil in hellfire today. He locked the gate behind him and returned to the BQ with a broom and a parka. I opened the door and greeted him. He felt very sorry for opening the gate. She talk say she come greet oga and him wife. That na why I allow am, because before she dey come as oga's sister. I've always known that wisdom does not come through classroom knowledge or being book smart, but is often part of an applied natural endowment. Sometimes it's just an inbuilt gift from above. I saw a lot of wisdom in the way the gate man acted. Instinctively, he knew it was much safer to throw the girl out than allow a fight between her and Oga Eddie. And God knows that I would have done something stupid if I had met her one-on-one outside. While we were growing up, my mother gave us many practical life lessons in her usual after-dinner talks, which she craftily used to keep us away from the famous moonlight plays, Egwonwa. One of those I vividly remember is never to respect a man who got you pregnant out of wedlock to marry you. You may force yourself on him, but his mind is somewhere else. Because I have compassion for that girl and her pregnancy, I wouldn't vouch that Eddie has a hand in it because the frustration in her voice betrayed her sincerity. She may or may not be pregnant, but her bitterness was simply over Eddie going home to marry a virgin from his village. I sat down on his lap, looked straight into his eyes and asked, "Baby, did you tell her you were going to your village to marry a virgin?" I brought a side table, sat before him and waited for an answer. We sat there for 5 minutes without speaking a word. Then he attempted to change the topic by blaming the gatesman for allowing her to enter the compound. "Oga Eddie, did you instruct the gatesman not to allow her to enter? Did you not hear him say the lady was your sister?" "Certainly. There must be another he knows as your girlfriend, Abby." He sat in silence, gazing at the broken window. "Sir," I said, holding his hand with my 2 hands. My mother was a village housewife. But if she had been a police officer, she would have made her way to becoming the chief investigative officer. She had a way of asking questions that compelled one to speak the truth and nothing but the truth. Each time she comes to a dead end like this one, she will use one of these short quotes. "Now tell the truth, and the truth will set you free." Or, "Tell the truth and shame the devil, who is the crown prince of liars." I looked into Eddie's eyes. They spoke volumes of untold stories. "Baby, allow the truth to set you free. Only then will I be able to understand you fully and know how to handle situations like this when and if they arise." It's a long story, baby. You will not understand. I know, sir. Try to make the long story short. I can bet you that even the most intelligent person on earth cannot understand until you explain. Am I making sense? "Yes," he said. "That girl that came this morning to cause all this havoc is my friend's girlfriend." He paused as if weighing his options of telling it all or playing pranks with me as a little girl that I was. "Her name is Kate." He turned to look at me, then bent his head and held his face with 2 hands. "She started sneaking into my house under the pretext that she was my sister. At least that was the story she sold to Beauty Amadi, my girlfriend, back then. She would come around and cook for me even while Beauty was here. Then with the excuse that my sister was around, Beauty will go home, leaving her with me in the house. One night we ran out of luck. Beauty left, and just like a hungry lioness, Kate jumped on me, and our hands got busy undressing each other right there in the parlor. We got carried away by excitement, convinced that we perfectly executed everything, and Beauty didn't have even minimal suspicions over what was happening between us. He paused as if regretting telling me these details. Then he continued the confession. 5 minutes later, the door opened, and right before us was Beauty, standing in total confusion and disdainfully looking at our nakedness. She had left her phone in the toilet and had to come back for it. Since she had no means of calling me, she returned to the house. Of course, she had the key to my house. Lo and behold, she had caught us in the act red-handed. She jumped on Kate like an angry wolf. Before I could say Jack, she had pulled off half of Kate's hair while banging her face on the floor. I separated the fight, but for Beauty, that was the end of our love story. Kate returned, hoping to take over the vacancy, but that turned out to be an even messier encounter as he exposed the liar that lived in her. Kate didn't know that Ikenna Brown, her boyfriend, complained to me 2 days after the fight. He said Kate told him she got into an unsolicited conflict somewhere but refused to discuss it. She came home half bowed, and every attempt to understand what happened to her has proved abortive because she has refused to talk about it. I was the only one who knew the truth about the matter and didn't know what to say to him. We were playboys or street boys, to use the correct word. He paused, shook his head, and continued his tale. It didn't occur to me, however, that Kate was living with Ikenna while experimenting with me. And when she visited my house 4 days later, she dared to tell me she was pregnant. I excused myself, went to the kitchen and got Eddie a bottle of cold beer, not minding that it was too early to start gulping down alcohol. He opened it with his teeth before I could fetch the bottle opener. He raised the bottle and took a long sip, not minding that a glass was in front of him. It was a lengthy introduction and a rough welcome to what was supposed to be our matrimonial home. He kept unwinding in bits and pieces the long and entangled story of his life in the ghetto of women, most of which ended in betrayal, abandonment, or bloody fights. I listened carefully as Eddie finally confessed the reckless, youthful exuberance he went through with women of various ages. I was desperately tired of wasting my time and energy with the slay queens I was hanging out with, he said in a shallow tone. At one point I said I will arise and take back my life. That was the origin of my idea of going to a remote village to get me a virgin for a wife. I'd often wondered how someone who had never seen me would come from Lagos to ask for my hand in marriage. I stood up and offered to make breakfast to brighten the morning. I chopped up some fresh tomatoes, onions, and green peppers. I cracked 4 eggs, beat them up with a fork, mixed them and tossed them into a frying pan. His conclusion dumbfounded me. But at least now I know why and how I ended up being the pawn on the chessboard. As we ate the fried egg with sliced bread, he told me how a friend jokingly told him he should go to Abakaliki if we were looking for a virgin to marry. In that part of the world, he continued, a man could cut off your head for eyeing his daughter, not to talk of attempting to sleep with her. The next day, that same friend showed up at my house with his uncle, visiting from Exambo. We jokingly discussed how it has become impossible to find virgins among our teenagers these days. The man laughed and said, in my village you can see as many virgins as you want, and he promised to connect me with one the moment he returned to the east. 10 days later, they reappeared and asked for some mobilization funds. They made a list of requests, including the gifts I needed to buy to facilitate the negotiations. Initially, it looked like a joke, but that was how it all started. Now, I understand the story of the middleman or go-between, as they call them in the village. I remember the day he came with gifts for my father, but little did I know I was the stock in trade. I even served him cola and drinks without knowing it was a setup. His visits aimed to observe, examine, and evaluate me for a prospective buyer in a distant land was shopping for a virgin that would soothe his desire to escape from the mess he had created around himself. When we finished eating, I remembered my promise to the cockroaches I saw dancing on the kitchen sink the night before. I returned to the kitchen and cleaned it from top to bottom. I looked through every nook and cranny and scrubbed it with kerosene, which kills even the unhatched eggs of cockroaches. It later occurred to me that I had been in Lagos for only about 24 hours, and it already looks like being in a war zone. I've not even seen the street we live in, not to talk of knowing the neighborhood we live in or what its name was. Eddie was worried about the broken windows, not just for the cost implications or because it might rain, but because his landlord might come home for the weekend and question the circumstances behind the vandalized windows. He recalled the landlord had warned him several times about bringing home girls with questionable characters. That made him so restless. He was eager to go out and get someone to come and fix it, but I insisted on going with him at least to know where we were because we arrived at night and the street was dark. As we were about to leave the house, we heard the blistering horn of a car and the gate man rushed to open the gate. Lo and behold, it was the landlord. "Oh my God," he whispered. "That's my landlord." From nowhere, sweats broke out on his forehead. We stepped back into the house, closed the door, and reasoned on the best lie to tell the landlord regarding the broken windows. Eddie suggested shifting the blame to local thieves who came while he was away. I took a quick look around the compound, and the only fence a thief could have jumped to enter was the front wall by the entrance gate. I looked at Eddie again and inquired, "Do you want that poor gateman to lose his job? Where would he say he went when the thieves came? Even if a thief entered this compound, would it not be more profitable to break into the main house instead of the BQ? Please think of something that makes sense, or tell him the truth and assure him it won't happen again." After several more attempts at inventing a story, none of which made sense, he took a chance by taking the bull by the horns. "Let's go, baby. Just introduce me as your wife and allow his reactions to take a regular course. I believe he'll be so happy that you have finally settled down." Eddie jumped at the idea, and we immediately stepped out to meet him as he was about to open his entrance door. He was a typical Yoruba man, so I knelt to greet him while Eddie partially prostrated. He wasn't sure if I was one of the many girls who hung around with Eddie, but before he could offload his barrel of abuse, Eddie greeted him again, but this time in the Yoruba language. Then he introduced me as his wife. "We just came in this morning from the village, and I want to take her to the market to buy a few things for the house." "Oh, congratulations, my daughter," he said. "I thank God, who sent you at the right time to salvage this playboy. I pray for wisdom upon your head to fit into this obese big shoes. That calls for celebration, but that will be tomorrow. I have just a few minutes before my driver takes me to Abeokuta, where my wife and kids went yesterday to visit my father. My wife will host both of you for a special dinner tomorrow." "Thank you, sir," we said almost in unison with another half bow. I held Eddie's hand and pinched him as they wanted to extend the discussion. Unfortunately, just at that moment, the pedestrian gate opened and a young, well-dressed man walked in. "Oga Bashiru," Eddie called out. "Your driver is here, sir." "Okay," he responded while opening the entrance door. "Tell him to get the black SUV ready. I will join him in 10 minutes. We waited outside to bid him farewell, but our main reason was to ensure he didn't get to walk towards the BQ. Eddie also started his car and used it to block the passage that led to the BQ. "All's well that ends well," we said in unison as the landlord left with his driver. It couldn't have gone any better. We drove out immediately to get the Alumaco artisans to come and fix the broken glasses. After some haggling over the glass cost and labor, we agreed on an all-inclusive amount. The guy was smart enough to claim the color of the broken glass was no longer on the market. He claimed he could find the replacement glass in only one place at the International Trade Fair market. That settled, we stopped at the market to buy the essential cleaning materials for the house, some insecticides for cockroaches, and some new bed sheets for a change. As we drove home from the market, Eddie stopped to showcase his trophy to his friend, who connected him to the go-between from my village. They whispered in very low voices to each other for a while. I knew they were talking about me, but I paid little or no attention to whatever they had to say, even though I was sure they were dissecting me. The guy had this air of a hero who defied time, went to the land of fantasy, and bought a virgin as requested by his friend.